thank you all for being here. This talk's going to be about juice jacking 101. My name is Robert Rowley. Recently began working for Spider Labs Trustwave under the Spider Labs department as a security researcher. So I'll go ahead and get started with asking the first question. The obvious question is, who here actually knows what juice jacking is? Who here has heard of it? Been a victim of it? So I want to hear from anybody else out here. So what is it? Anybody want to say? You. Yeah. What is it's be aware when charging your phone. Don't plug into shit. The best part was before I had done this, when I started searching Google for the term juice jacking, that term, those two words together, meant something completely different, which I cannot say on stage. So effectively, juice jacking, what I made it become, and because this image is terrible, it looks great on my screen. You can kind of see it here. It's making one of these kiosks here that you find in airports do malicious things. Basically, you shouldn't have trusted it in the first place. You didn't know what you were plugging into, and I basically decided to make one that's malicious and does neat and novel things. So I'll go ahead and jump in right away, explaining the build behind making one of these. The intention is that actually I should give a little background. Is that the idea came up during a July 4th party, like last year, which is like a month before DefCon, and me and one of my friends were just like, I came up to him with the idea, and like we kind of talked back and forth, and within a month period of time, we had a malicious kiosk already built. The basic components were simple. It was one half hardware, one half software. You have to have a computer. You want to stick it in a box with a lot of USB cables dangling out everywhere. And then you want to have the software that runs on the computer. So for the DefCon purpose, we use a Linux via live CD. USB utils package has everything you need to start modifying and tweaking with all the basically USB interfaces, USB devices. And then a few custom shell scripts makes everything go super easy, and you can do a lot of theoretically bad things from that point. So for those who don't know, I can call myself a hacker because that's me with a hacksaw going to a laptop, just cutting it in half so it fits into the box, and that's it. Actually in the box, it's silly. That's an EEE PC and basically an iOmega CD-ROM drive, and then you put this box somewhere out in public. I've only put these boxes out at security conferences, so I feel as if I'm legally safe to some degree, because those should be the people that are completely like cognizant about what's out there for technology. So you might see this actually, and to tell you the truth, this is probably the worst thing I've ever built in my life. It looks terrible. There's a plastic screen in front of the laptop. There's these big rivets that should basically say this is something bad. In fact, the lock on the back of the box was more expensive than anything else there, because the guy who helped me build this, Riverside, had access to this really high-end, super like $1,000 padlock, and we were more afraid of people breaking into the kiosk than we were to about doing anything else. We just figured they just break it open, tear everything out, and be like, haha, we won. Because of course, what did we do? We did probably the silliest thing possible. We decided to deploy this at DefCon, and I apologize for the messed up wording here. This is when you convert between ODP and PPT a lot. It just destroys your slides. But so we decided we were going to deploy it at DefCon, and we actually did. We deployed it in, of all rooms, the Wall of Sheep room, which Riverside helps put on, or basically runs it. So this is the room, if you guys are not familiar, it's a room where they have a giant projector that displays people's passwords that were sent over plain text in the network. And it's basically the Wall of Sheep. It's a room for the sheep to go to. And it was entertaining because, well, I'll actually go into just saying, it's the largest hacker conference. Attendees treat it a lot like the Wild West, so I figured that the kiosk was going to be attacked. So I had to take a lot of special precautions, and I'll kind of mention that in the build components. But the best part about this was that that year at the Rio, there was a pay cell phone charging station in the hallway. And the pay cell phone charging station was getting customers. And it was hilarious because I'd see people every once in a while plugging into it, or like grabbing their credit card out to plug into this thing that connects over, I don't even know what, some sort of wireless network connection to do a credit card auth, or just stores your credit card on it. And I'd see them and I'd say, hey, did you know there's a free charging station? Like, it's over in the Wall of Sheep room. The guy's like, awesome, I'm gonna go check that out. And the guy just takes off, and I go check a few minutes later. And it's hilarious because you would think that at DefCon, one of the world's largest hackers conference, people would be very aware of this threat, or at least at the time, and they would maybe take precautions or maybe think about it for a second before plugging in, and that's absolutely wrong. People, hundreds of people in the end, plugged in. And I'll show you. Here's some evidence. It's that guy. I don't know who that guy is. It doesn't show his face. And this constantly happened all weekend long. We did a lot of this. So I'll actually show you what the screen says real quick. So this is what the screen on the side of the blue box looked like. This nice little happy, friendly cell phone charging kiosk. And then after the kiosk knew, it would basically detect whenever a USB device was plugged in. And when it detected that, it would swap the screen to show this, which basically says, you know, you're stupid, but you should not trust plugging in your smartphone to a public kiosk. You know, like your data's at risk. Like other actions could have been taken. Like we've taken the ethical route. All that little wording is like, yeah, taking the ethical route, and your data is safe. So enjoy the free charge for now. What's interesting too is that there was a lot of threats. I figured that the main threat was actually the primary concern when we were building this was A, nobody was going to plug in. That was wrong. B, that somebody's going to actually attack the device. So we had to do a lot of special things during the build process to defend against somebody actually attacking the computer, basically while they have it plugged in or while they're attacking the kiosk. It turns out the biggest threat was physical because the whole contraption weighed about 30 pounds. So somebody could have just walked up and taken it. Nobody did. Obviously, I still have it. And the other attack would be, who here can take a good wild guess and tell me what the other primary method of attack? Who hasn't heard me say it before? All right. The teensy? Oh yeah, you could do teensy, which is a little tiny miniature, like, basically you can program it to be a little miniature keyboard, and it will, when you plug it into the computer, it'll just automatically run a bunch of like keystrokes and mouse commands, things like that. That would be it. Then the primary attack is, turns out, I'm giving up USB ports, so you can plug in USB devices. It doesn't have to be your phone. It could be a keyboard, literally any USB a human interface device, which was fun to actually thwart because it just requires disabling the module in the kernel. Another one? What? Yeah, you can disable USB HID in the Linux kernel and just be like, boom, like no, now no USB keyboards work. When they set it to an iPod? You know, if you can give me an iPod that can send keyboard commands, then we'll test it out. Yeah, I'm going to get a free iPod, won't I? Strangest iPod in the world. It's going to have to... It's possible to make an iPod act like a keyboard. It's also possible to make an Android device act like a keyboard, which I go into at the end of the talk. You can actually reprogram your Android device to so basically, when you plug it in, it actually says, oh, I'm a keyboard, by the way, via USB, and it will just start inputting, basically just act exactly like a USB keyboard. So, other ideas? Nope. All right, cool. That was actually the primary threat, which was taken care of via just kernel module. So, after DefCon, it was actually kind of interesting because I went to TourCon, and I've actually built a completely new kiosk because I figured some people might have seen the blue one, and so I decided I wanted to build one that did a little bit more activity against the user, and I didn't want to cut another EEE PC in half, so I built a completely new one. You'll see it here in a minute. The new trick that it did was that it would monitor. It would take your unique USB, basically your device ID, and monitor it and say, this is how long you were plugged in for. So then I can do metrics today saying, okay, average people would plug in for this long period of time, and then I can say how many attacks can be executed in that period of time. What's funny is, even though it had already been released, and it was like a couple months later, people still plugged into it. At a much smaller conference, I think about 4 people plugged in in the 8 hours that I had it running before my talk was given at the end of the day. And it was great because I actually brought that guy on stage and had him go up. You have another question? Where I brought the hardware for it, but I didn't bring the whole one because I'm from California, so I didn't want to like travel across the country with a giant like kiosk. And I have a lot of good pictures of them, so you can show you what they look like. Unfortunately, I couldn't bring that one here because I would have hoped that nobody would have plugged into it anyways. Who would have plugged into it? Well, I know a few people would have, because who plugged into the MITN booth their cell phone charging stuff? I had nothing to do with that, but they actually have cell phone charging like cables out on their booth. And the second I saw that, I struck up a conversation. I was like, "Hey, do you want to add my charging device?" Like, so For those of you who are here and smart about it, there might be a USB hub that's over there in about like an hour or so, and we'll see if you plug into it. I have a battery. Is it modded? Nice. So this is actually how bad that kiosk looked. I built this by myself, and again, I mentioned the blue one was the worst thing I've ever built. This is the worst thing I've ever built. You can't see the details. Literally, this is a big black box that says free. It doesn't explain that it's cell phone charging or anything. It just says free. It was stupid. It worked. It also weighed like 50 pounds. So I dragged this thing around and like set it up in the conference area, and people still plugged in. You can't see the specific details, but even like anywhere where there was a curve, because I didn't vectorize the image right, there's like all jaggedy, like pixely, and like there's some plastic on it where it's like cracked and broken. It was quite hilarious that people still plugged in. But what I learned from GrrCON was actually a very interesting difference, is the people who did plug in, I got to talk with them, and I said, why did you plug in? You know, what was happening, blah, blah, blah. The one guy with the best story was that he was the guy who was the first guy to plug in. It was right after the keynote. He walked out of the keynote, made a beeline for the kiosk, and plugged in. And that guy was hilarious because I was like, why would you make a beeline for this and just destroy yourself like that? And his explanation was that his wife had called him, and his battery died. And he figured out it was an emergency, so what had happened was it was a stress response. He'd become anxious, and like he decided that nothing was worth it, and that his only focus was that he needed to charge his phone to basically contact his wife. And this is probably true for everybody here. There are probably exceptions, but if your phone runs out of battery, you think, like, reflect on yourself a little bit and say, wow, I'm feeling a little bit anxious right now, or maybe stressful, especially if like your significant other had called you, or your boss, or something was happening at work. You're more likely going to do something that's not secure if you aren't paying attention. And that's part of what like the interesting intricacies of this attack is that it's actually a really simple attack. It's really stupidly simple, but it actually angles off of a lot of other pivot points and basically possibilities in order to actually become successful. But so that was it for GrrCON. I actually gave away battery packs to everybody at GrrCON who had plugged in because it was silly. Everybody who admitted they plugged in. There were a couple of people that didn't want to admit to me that they had plugged in. And then next up was ThoughtCon. At ThoughtCon, by that point in time, I'd actually collected a mini Poner, this little tiny, basically OpenWRT router. And I didn't know anything really to do with it, and then it suddenly came to my mind that it was really, really small, much like a Raspberry Pi and a lot of other devices. It's running Linux, and it has USB. And suddenly I built probably the smallest juice jacking device. It fit inside, so you can see it by comparison, that's an EE PC, that's like a 7-inch laptop. And by like basic comparative size, everything fits in this box for the most part. I have it here. So this is the EE PC with the USB hub. This is all you need to build a little kiosk. And this is a battery pack, which I purchased because, well, I'm not going to be the guy that gets caught with this. So this is a standard USB battery pack. This is actually a pretty badass one. You might notice that something fits inside the other thing. So feasibly, you can build a battery pack which is malicious, running a little mini Poner or a Raspberry Pi device inside, running off a USB hub. That was kind of what I tried to build here, and I didn't get it done. So after ThoughtCon, I actually did put a little bit of effort because I knew I had the miniaturized version, and I went over to Kinko's and actually printed up a really nice looking like poster board, because I didn't need anything more than the poster board. I just needed I need something to display the fact that you can charge, and then something else that will basically hold the phones. And this is probably the best one I built that looks the cleanest. At layer 1, I think like one person plugged in because the location where I set up the kiosk was in a pretty bad location. It was directly across from the ATM that said, "Welcome to the danger zone." So people were pretty hesitant about plugging things in electronics at layer 1. Also, about halfway through the day, like just after I gave my talk, I left the kiosk out there, but somebody had taken the power cord off. They thought that the little USB to like basically 110 volt to 5 volt AC or 5 volt DC adapter that was plugged into the wall, they thought that was the computer. So somebody actually snagged my power adapter and turned the whole device off. It was hilarious because that wasn't the computer at all. The computer was literally glued inside this little basically a wood container on the back of the whole kiosk, basically the poster board. So somebody had tried to steal my computer and like, haha, I got your Pwn plug. And I was like, that's not a Pwn plug at all. Like, you got my $1 device, and like, I'm pretty pissed, but oh well. Guess that's what I get. So what I wanted to mention is that, so after DefCon is actually where most of the media picked this up, and it was very interesting, is that the media, that was, I mean, basically building the kiosk and deploying it was very fun. A side benefit was that everybody just started talking about it, and they, I think it was Brian Krebs who coined the term juice jacking, which was great because it basically it gave it some solidity. It basically gave it a reference for everybody. He wrote about it first. Then after that, it was like TG Daily, which is Tom's Hardware, basically. I'm going so slow through these. CNET, trying to get through these quicker. Then MSNBC talked about it. So basically got like everywhere, every big-ish thing. And then it was everywhere on Twitter, and it was kind of funny to see, like, watch Twitter feeds for people talking about juice jacking. And but the most important thing is that, yeah, like I said, it was fun for me. It was easy because it was such a simple idea. There were some complexities that I could have probably put more time into, like building nicer kiosks that don't look like crap, but I didn't need to, apparently. And the most important thing, though, is that it was such a simple idea, and it was it was easy to execute, and I got actually a lot of good press back from it. I got more than I had ever expected. And one of the things that I wanted to mention about in this talk is that, simply enough, like, I didn't do some crazy awesome, like, complicated thing. I actually put a really simple concept together, and I just did it. And in doing something simple, simple concepts and deploying them and actually doing, putting things out there in the world, you actually get a lot of good press coming back, and you'll be surprised as to what little things you might do that you think are simple and dumb that actually get a lot of publicity and get you a lot of good, basically good vibes. And people know me now as the juice jacking guy or the mustache guy. I don't know which one, but all right. So I'm actually going to get into some technical points about this talk because, well, I've got to talk about something technical. Otherwise, you guys are going to kind of miss it. So I'm going to give up ideas. You get last choice, but what are the ideas that everybody has to not get jacked from a malicious kiosk? Charge it in your pocket. Yeah, bring your own cable. Bring your own cable charger. Yep. Remove the SD card. It won't be able to access the SD card, but it'll still access your phone. Yeah, so it'll be able to do a lot of things. Android specifically, you'll still be able to access the Android debugger. Turning off USB debugging is a good one, but make sure you've actually turned it off. That's actually one of the key ones. What's funny is in a lot of the customized ROMs, they actually turn on USB debugging by default. And you won't know this until, I actually didn't know this myself until I plugged in and I checked the phone. And when I did the USB utils against my phone, it was like, oh yeah, you're in debug mode. I'm like, oh crap. Like, that was because I just did a fresh install like Cyanogen mod or something, and they leave debug mode turned on. Any other? You could encrypt the file system? Yeah, you could do that. That'd be actually a really good idea, because then you won't be able to access that. What? Yeah, you can still get the encrypted version and then do more attacks, but it'll prevent. Like, frankly, yeah, what's funny is a lot of these ideas, and one that I didn't hear was USB cable neutering, which is the one that I always hear first, and I hate because I'm a guy, and I don't like that word. It's basically removing the data pins from the USB cable, and I thought, well, that's really actually cool. It's what everybody says, well, you know, there's 4 pins, power and data. Yeah. You should have one made up. Oh, it does backfeed? Cool. All right, you kind of mumbled there. I couldn't hear the end of it, but I'm gonna be like, cool. Just want to come up here because you're talking. You need to get me a beer if you come up here, though. I'm gonna move on. You'll be busy for the next 10 minutes. Yeah, through the. Yep. Quick. Neither of those. Something good. I know, it's not your fault. All right, well, so. I got interruption free for 10 minutes now. Great. All right. Man, I wish I was that drunk. All right. So back to this. So somebody mentioned you can also, I think somebody mentioned you can power off the device, which is cool, but actually some devices, this is different for each individual device. Some will actually still allow you to access the SD card even while the device is turned off. So not perfect. Somebody did mention this next one, which is confirmation before mounting or debug access. That's a great one, but you have to remember that every phone's operating system is actually different. This is mostly Android specific, but each phone's, basically their ROM is totally different on how they handle this, and some phones, surprise to me, sometimes I'll find that the phone actually left me in debug mode after the last time, or didn't ask before allowing basically charge or basically access to the SD card or whatnot. Which one? iPhones, the majority of my research actually was with older iPhones, which I'll mention. It was kind of funny. I totally obliterated older iPhones. So if you're like a first-gen iPhone, you're screwed. Newer iPhones actually do have protections against this, which verify who you are before, basically verify that they're plugging into the right computer beforehand. This is theoretically addressable via brute force attack against the phone, but I haven't been able to get my hands on an iPhone 4 or newer to be able to actually test these things out, unfortunately. But if anybody wants to and wants to put their phone on the line, plug into my USB devices. It's way more fun when you try. Another good one is bringing up a backup battery, which is what I basically do now because I don't even know when I'm going to be able to get to a power source or not. So it's always good to just have a backup battery somewhere. You can charge a lot of things, and it looks pretty cool when you can actually have your phone charging for multiple days. I think I got my beer. Awesome. I got 5 minutes? Ah. Awesome. All right. All right, well, I got 5 minutes, so I'm going to burn through a lot of this. So these are my preferred methods here, actually, is that bringing a backup battery and bringing your own charger are actually the key ones, because those are the only things that are within your control. And I don't like USB cable neutering for a second reason, because if you're remembering to bring your neutered data cable, you might as well have remembered to bring your backup battery or something else. So that's that. That's my 2 cents. For business, it's a matter of policy. For users, it's a matter of not forgetting the right devices. So remember this from earlier? It's kind of funny. What I've noticed is a trend since the last time, basically since I started giving this talk originally, is that I started noticing that people were actually plugging into the power adapters, which you can't really see here. Right there is literally a power strip right next to the USB charging station. And people were really smart, and they just plugged into the thing behind it. They were moving charging stations out of the way so they can plug into it. I saw that a couple times at the airports, and it was quite funny. Specifics for a few devices. Android is majority of the ROMs ship with an ask before mounting. That's great. Double check your ROM because some of them don't. This differs from ROM to ROM, and especially if you're doing like Cyanogen mod. If you're doing your own modder, like your own basically hacked ROM or custom ROM, double check again, even after you've installed your ROM, because the majority of those will leave debugging turned on. Android debugger actually is a whole talk on itself, the malicious things you can do. In fact, I know somebody who did a talk. You can look it up. His Twitter handle is @thecause. Look up what he did with physical drive-by attacks. That stuff is really wicked because he basically does methods where he can brute force your screen lock key, as well as basically grab your Google Auth basically token and then log in as your Google user for the other devices. That's its own talk. But it's a special condition. Also, I just should mention that Androids actually let you swap out the batteries, whereas iPhones don't. So you can't actually have extra backup batteries. You were required to use a proprietary cable, which means you have to carry an extra specific cable for that one purpose. Really high market control. The original iPhones did auto sync, which literally, like the original iPhones, as I mentioned, I plugged in, boom, I had everything off the device. Newer ones use it's a key, encryption key. So both the device and the computer have to agree basically on this encryption key before communication can take place. Is that key brute forceable? I have not done that yet. So let's go into advanced topics really quick. You can do what I did with juice jacking. Basically, if you want to kind of follow through and do similar to what I did. So you can roll your own kiosk, push malware to phones, pull data off phones. You can do another interesting thing is doing foot traffic monitoring, which is basically pulling the device ID I didn't mention this as well with the iPhone section. The device ID is also your UDID, which is getting a lot of press lately. It's a unique device identifier for your phone, which gets dumped via some programs, as well as turns out via USB as well, with no authentication required. Your device will give up its UDID. You can also attack existing kiosks. There's some smart stuff going on in that kiosk, so you can actually do malicious attacks directly against it. This was the unique, going back to the early portion of this talk, this is the unique stuff that I had to do to stop people at DefCon from attacking us, or basically attacking the kiosk and getting control. So beyond the kiosk is the idea that, forget everything about the kiosk, just transfer all these attack methods to your laptop or a PC, use infected phones to infect other laptops or other phones. There's a device in another talk basically about ADB, where you can basically do direct ADB access, basically phone-to-phone attacks. Also mini Poner powered or Raspberry Pi powered, really tiny stuff. So the summary is core threat isn't the kiosk. It's design that shows usability first, and this was a major threat until like 2 years ago, or basically last year when they corrected all this. Then the complexity goes well beyond the kiosk, malware infecting PCs, so on and so forth. And it isn't just phone malware, because you can track people. You can monitor where people are located. If you know their unique device identifier for that person's phone, you know where they are when they plug into their USB into a device somewhere located. Basically that you have access to pull USB device IDs off of. I forgot to mention too, is that one of the other summary points is seriously have fun, because if I hadn't decided to go have fun, just try this random thing, I wouldn't have been here right now. So I want to thank everybody, Wall Sheep for giving me up the place, Iggy, Riverside CDocs helped me out with a lot of this stuff, GrrCON for letting me be here, and that's my contact information there. I probably should have my TrustWave contact information, all right, thank you. I'm done. I got a beer.